For most of human history, survival was not guaranteed. The body was the primary technology. Every muscle, fiber, bone structure, and reflex existed under constant testing. To live meant to walk long distances, carry weight, endure hunger, and recover from injury without assistance. The human organism was shaped in an environment where failure carried immediate consequences. Archaeological evidence shows that early humans possessed stronger skeletons than modern populations. The shafts of ancient leg bones were thicker, denser, and more resistant to bending stress. These were not athletes or exceptional individuals. They were ordinary members of their communities. Daily activity alone demanded continuous mechanical loading, and the body adapted accordingly. Bone is living tissue. It does not simply grow and remain static. It constantly remodels itself in response to pressure. When subjected to stress, it becomes denser. When the stress disappears, it gradually weakens. Over generations, environments with reduced physical demand produce lighter skeletons. Modern humans live in such an environment. The agricultural revolution began the change. People shifted from roaming landscapes to staying near fields. Movement declined. Yet, farming still required effort. Digging soil, carrying water, grinding grain. The body continued to receive signals that strength was necessary. Skeletons from early agricultural societies show some reduction in robustness, but not a collapse. The Industrial Revolution accelerated the transformation. Machines replaced heavy labor. Urban living reduced travel distances. Instead of walking miles to gather food, food came to markets. Instead of building shelter directly, humans occupied constructed structures. Muscular demand decreased, but still existed through manual work. The modern technological age removed the final pressures. Transportation eliminated walking. Elevators removed climbing. Tools minimized force. Work shifted from physical manipulation to symbolic processing. The human body began operating in an environment evolution had never encountered, one where survival did not depend on physical capability. Studies measuring grip strength provide a simple metric of this shift. Grip strength correlates strongly with overall muscular fitness and even lifespan. Across multiple populations, average grip strength has declined in younger generations compared to older ones at the same age. The change is not dramatic within a single lifetime, but across decades the trend becomes visible. Posture has also altered. The human spine evolved to balance an upright body that moved frequently. Long periods of sitting create a different loading pattern. The curvature of the lower spine weakens, shoulders rotate forward, and stabilizing muscles deactivate. Instead of supporting dynamic motion, the skeleton supports prolonged stillness. Endurance has diminished as well. The human species evolved remarkable persistence hunting capabilities. Our ancestors could track prey over many hours, regulating body heat through sweating and maintaining steady pace. Today, the average person experiences fatigue after short exertion. The physiological systems still exist, but they remain untrained and gradually atrophy when unused. Even the jaw has changed. Anthropological comparisons show modern faces becoming smaller and narrower. Softer diets require less chewing force. Reduced mechanical demand during childhood development alters bone growth patterns. Teeth crowd because jaws do not expand to previous sizes. This is not genetic degeneration in the traditional sense, but developmental adaptation to environment. The immune system follows a similar pattern. In natural settings, constant exposure to pathogens trained defensive responses. In highly sanitized environments, exposure declines. The immune system sometimes becomes overreactive or underprepared. Allergies increase, and certain autoimmune conditions become more common. The system evolved for continuous challenge and now encounters controlled conditions. One might argue these changes represent improvement rather than regression. After all, humans suffer fewer injuries from daily life. We have medicine to repair damage. Yet the question remains whether removing pressure also removes capability. Evolution operates through necessity. When a trait is no longer required, maintaining it becomes biologically inefficient. Metabolic consequences appear as well. The body evolved to manage scarcity. Energy storage mechanisms were essential for survival. In environments of constant food availability, these mechanisms persist but become maladaptive. Fat accumulation increases because the system anticipates famine that never arrives. The biological program does not match the environment. Children provide a clear illustration. Previous generations spent most waking hours in movement, climbing, running, balancing, and carrying objects, developed coordination and strength naturally. Modern childhood often centers around stationary engagement. The developing body receives fewer signals to strengthen connective tissues and stabilizing muscles. Over time, baseline capability shifts. None of these changes occur because the human organism is malfunctioning. They occur because the organism responds precisely as biology predicts. The body economizes. It builds only what it must maintain. When environments demand less, the body becomes less prepared. Historical skeleton comparisons reinforce this observation. Researchers examining remains from different eras consistently find decreasing cortical bone thickness and joint robustness in later populations. The decline correlates with lifestyle transitions rather than genetic replacement. The species remains the same, but the pressures shaping it change. Technology functions as an external organ system. Tools extend reach, vehicles extend legs, machines extend muscles. As these extensions grow more powerful, the biological systems they replace receive fewer signals to persist at former capacity. The trade-off is efficiency. Energy once required for survival can be allocated elsewhere. However, biological systems cannot distinguish between temporary assistance and permanent replacement. They respond only to use. When a capability is not exercised, regulatory pathways downregulate its maintenance. Muscle fibers shrink, bone density decreases, reflex sensitivity dulls. Even balance shows measurable decline. Modern environments are flat, predictable, and structured. Uneven terrain once required constant micro-adjustments in posture. Without this challenge, proprioceptive acuity lessens. Falls become more dangerous, not because gravity changed, but because stabilizing systems lost practice. Respiratory capacity follows a similar pattern. Continuous low-level activity maintained efficient oxygen utilization. Sedentary behavior reduces aerobic conditioning. Lungs remain structurally capable, yet the integrated system operates below potential. Importantly, these changes do not imply individuals cannot train themselves back to higher capability. Athletes demonstrate the human body still holds extraordinary potential. The difference is baseline expectation. In the past, physical competence was default. Now it requires deliberate effort. The weakening body, therefore, represents not collapse, but adaptation to comfort. Evolution shaped humans for a world of resistance. The modern world offers assistance instead. Over generations, assistance becomes environment, and environment becomes biology. The question emerging is not whether humans are becoming incapable, but whether capability still matters in shaping the species. The transformation of the human body did not occur suddenly. It unfolded across thousands of small adjustments, each generation living slightly differently than the one before it. No single individual noticed the shift because the body adapts slowly and adaptation hides change. Only when scientists compare remains separated by centuries does the pattern become unmistakable. One of the clearest indicators appears in joint surfaces. Ancient knee and hip joints show signs of heavy, repetitive use. The cartilage attachment areas are thicker, the bone beneath them reinforced by constant compression. These were not injuries, but structural reinforcement. The skeleton expected impact and prepared for it. In modern populations, these same areas show reduced structural development. The joints remain functional, but optimized for lower loads. The feet also reveal a quiet regression in mechanical demand. Human feet evolved as flexible but strong platforms designed to handle uneven terrain. Walking across soil, rock, and vegetation forced continuous adaptation. Modern environments provide flat ground, cushioned footwear, and shock absorption. The intrinsic muscles of the foot, once essential for stability, activate less frequently. Over time, the arch weakens in many individuals, not because of disease, but because the mechanical challenge disappeared. Hand structure follows a similar trend. Early humans used hands for tool shaping, climbing, cutting, and gripping irregular surfaces. The fingers experienced high friction forces and variable pressure. Today, most manipulation involves uniform objects designed for ergonomic ease. The fine motor control remains advanced, but raw gripping capability declines. The hand becomes specialized for precision over force. Interestingly, the nervous system adapts alongside the skeleton. Reaction pathways refine toward predictable tasks. Driving a vehicle requires quick responses, but within a limited context. Typing requires accuracy, but minimal strength. The brain reorganizes motor priorities around these repetitive patterns. It does not lose capacity entirely, yet its baseline readiness for unpredictable physical challenges diminishes. Energy expenditure provides another perspective. Anthropological estimates suggest prehistoric humans walked between 8 and 15 kilometers per day during normal activity. This was not exercise, but existence. Modern daily movement often measures below 2 kilometers, sometimes far below. The cardiovascular system evolved to support sustained moderate output. Without demand, resting metabolic patterns dominate. The heart itself responds to use. Regular endurance activity enlarges stroke volume and efficiency. Reduced activity maintains basic function but not reserve capacity. As a result, sudden physical exertion feels disproportionately difficult. The body interprets it as emergency rather than routine behavior. Temperature regulation also changes subtly. Humans evolved exceptional cooling ability through sweating and airflow over moving skin. When activity declines, this system is rarely pushed to operate at full range. Tolerance for heat decreases not because climate changed, but because physiological training vanished. Environments become uncomfortable faster even if conditions remain survivable. Sleep patterns have altered as well. Historically, physical fatigue synchronized rest cycles with daylight rhythms. Artificial lighting and reduced exertion disrupt these cues. The body receives fewer signals to initiate deep recovery processes. Muscular repair becomes less necessary, and restorative sleep architecture shifts accordingly. Nutrition interacts strongly with this transformation. Early diets demanded chewing effort and digestion of fibrous materials. Modern processed foods reduce both. Digestive organs remain capable, yet mechanical digestion requirements decrease. The jaw shrinks, chewing muscles weaken, and dental alignment changes. Orthodontic treatment corrects the result, but the developmental cause persists. Another important factor is injury tolerance. In demanding environments, minor injuries were common, forcing tissues to adapt stronger healing responses. Controlled environments reduce injury frequency, but also reduce adaptive reinforcement. Connective tissues such as tendons and ligaments respond to load by strengthening. Without repeated load, they remain thinner and more prone to strain when suddenly stressed. This does not mean modern humans are fragile by design. Rather, fragility appears when exposed to conditions no longer encountered regularly. A person adapted to chairs struggles with ground sitting. Someone accustomed to climate control struggles with temperature variation. The organism functions perfectly within its expected environment and poorly outside it. Population-wide medical data reflects this environmental specialization. Certain musculoskeletal disorders increase not because the body fails randomly, but because it operates under conditions evolution did not anticipate. Lower back discomfort correlates with prolonged sitting postures that maintain constant muscle tension rather than dynamic engagement. Children again demonstrate the clearest evidence. When exposed to varied movement during development, their musculoskeletal systems form broader capability. When confined to limited motion patterns, development narrows. The body builds exactly what repeated behavior demands and neglects what it does not encounter. The concept of regression therefore requires careful definition. Humans are not devolving into inferior organisms. They are optimizing for efficiency within a supportive environment. Muscles unnecessary for survival shrink because maintaining them consumes energy. Bone mass reduces because reinforcement without load wastes resources. However, evolution historically balanced efficiency with unpredictability. The natural world demanded preparedness for rare but critical challenges, fleeing danger, carrying weight, enduring scarcity. Modern stability removes these rare events from everyday experience. Preparedness becomes optional. If the environment remains stable indefinitely, this specialization presents no disadvantage. But if conditions shift suddenly, the gap between potential and practiced ability becomes significant. Technology compensates for weakness only while functioning reliably. The biological reserve that once handled disruption becomes thinner. This raises an important question about long-term adaptation. Are humans gradually transitioning into a species that depends on external systems for basic resilience? If so, the body is not weakening arbitrarily. It is reallocating biological investment towards systems still required, possibly cognitive or social rather than physical. In evolutionary terms, pressure defines capability. Remove pressure and capability fades. Introduce new pressure and new capability emerges. The weakening body may therefore represent the closing chapter of one survival strategy and the beginning of another, one where physical endurance matters less than coordination with constructed environments. Yet, biology carries memory. Traits unused for long periods may eventually disappear from baseline population capacity. The modern body stands at a midpoint, still capable of ancestral performance, but no longer conditioned for it by default. The distinction between possible and typical grows wider each generation. What once required no training now requires deliberate practice. And what requires deliberate practice often becomes rare. For over a century, the human brain has been treated as the defining feature of our species. Compared to earlier hominins, it expanded dramatically, enabling language, planning, symbolic thought, and complex cooperation. Larger brain size was long assumed to correlate with greater intelligence, and for most of evolutionary history, that assumption appeared consistent. Yet when scientists began measuring modern skulls against ancient ones, a surprising observation emerged. The average human brain today is slightly smaller than it was at the end of the last ice age. The difference is not enormous. Roughly the volume of a small chicken egg separates many modern brains from those of humans living 20,000 years ago. On an individual level, this change means nothing. But across an entire species, it suggests a directional trend. The question is not whether the brain shrank, but why it would shrink at all in a species defined by cognition. At first glance, the idea seems contradictory. Civilization has advanced continuously. Mathematics, engineering, medicine, and digital technology all indicate increasing intellectual capability. How could a shrinking brain coexist with expanding knowledge? One explanation involves efficiency. Biological systems are expensive to maintain. and the brain is the most energy-demanding organ in the body. It consumes about 20% of the body's energy, despite representing only a small fraction of its mass. Evolution favors conserving energy whenever possible. If the same cognitive performance can be achieved with less tissue, reduction becomes advantageous. Early humans faced unpredictable environments. Each individual needed extensive knowledge of terrain, plants, animals, weather patterns, and group dynamics. Survival depended on personally storing large amounts of information. The brain operated as a comprehensive database and processing center simultaneously. Larger neural networks provided flexibility for novel situations. Modern humans operate within structured systems. Knowledge exists outside individual minds in written records, institutions, and digital storage. The individual no longer requires complete internal representation of reality. Instead, the brain specializes in accessing and navigating external information. This changes cognitive demand from retention to retrieval. Consider navigation. A prehistoric traveler memorized landmarks, star positions, seasonal changes, and spatial relationships across vast areas. Today, a person follows step-by-step instructions generated by satellites and algorithms. The brain still makes decisions, but stores far less environmental detail. The cognitive workload shifts from spatial modeling to interface interaction. Language offers another example. Oral cultures required memorization of entire narratives across generations. The brain maintained rhythm, structure, and meaning without written reinforcement. With writing systems, information persists outside memory. The brain focuses on interpretation rather than preservation. This shift suggests not intelligence loss, but cognitive outsourcing. The brain collaborates with tools. As external storage grows reliable, internal storage requirements decrease. Over many generations, selection may favor brains optimized for rapid learning and flexible attention rather than massive memory capacity. Social structure also influences brain architecture. Humans evolved in small groups where individuals needed to track relationships intimately. Everyone knew everyone. Modern societies involve thousands or millions of indirect connections managed through roles and institutions. The brain relies on simplified representations instead of detailed personal models. Complexity moves into systems rather than neurons. Another hypothesis involves domestication. Some researchers compare human civilization to a self-domestication process. Domesticated animals often show reduced brain size compared to wild counterparts while maintaining functional behavior within controlled environments. Aggression decreases, cooperation increases, and survival depends less on individual adaptability. In human societies, rules, norms, and infrastructure reduce the need for constant environmental vigilance. Individuals do not scan for predators, locate water daily, or construct shelter from raw materials. Many risk assessments are handled collectively. The brain may therefore invest less in general survival processing and more in specialized tasks like communication and symbolic reasoning. Importantly, smaller brain volume does not necessarily imply reduced neuron efficiency. Neural organization matters more than total size. Connections can become denser, pathways faster, and processing more specialized. A smaller but better structured network can outperform a larger, generalized one. Evolution often favors optimization over expansion once basic capability is established. However, some scientists propose a more concerning interpretation. They suggest that certain forms of deep reasoning may decline when rarely exercised. If environments reward quick responses and repetitive patterns, neural circuits supporting sustained analytical thought may receive less reinforcement. The brain adapts to the problems it encounters most often. Digital environments present exactly such conditions. Rapid information switching encourages scanning rather than prolonged focus. Reward systems favor immediate feedback. Over time, attention fragments into shorter intervals. This does not mean intelligence disappears, but that its style changes. Archaeological artifacts hint at cognitive differences as well. Ancient toolkits often required multi-step production sequences involving planning and patience. Modern tools arrive pre-constructed. The average person interacts with final products rather than raw processes. The brain handles operation rather than creation. Educational systems partially compensate by training abstract reasoning, yet daily life rarely demands its constant use. Much decision-making is guided by automated systems, recommendations, and standardized procedures. The brain becomes supervisor rather than builder. The shrinking brain debate, therefore, centers on interpretation. One view sees optimization and collaboration with technology. Another sees underuse, leading to diminished baseline capability. Both acknowledge the physical change, but differ in meaning. Perhaps intelligence is migrating. Instead of residing entirely inside the skull, it distributes across networks of humans and machines. Individual brains hold less total information, but access vastly more through connection. From an evolutionary perspective, this could represent a new survival strategy, collective cognition replacing solitary cognition. The challenge lies in dependency. A brain shaped for cooperation with external memory may struggle without it. The ancient brain prepared for isolation. The modern brain prepares for connectivity. The size reduction may signal confidence in a stable informational environment. Whether this trend represents improvement or vulnerability remains uncertain, but it marks a significant departure from the trajectory that once defined human evolution. Bigger brain, greater independence. To understand whether a smaller brain represents loss or refinement, it helps to consider how evolution treats complexity. Expansion is rarely permanent. Many biological systems grow only until efficiency becomes possible. After that point, they reorganize. The early growth of the human brain may have been necessary to overcome survival challenges, but once cultural systems stabilized those challenges, maintaining excess capacity became costly. A useful comparison exists in computer design. Early machines required large hardware to perform relatively simple operations. As architecture improved, devices became smaller while performance increased. The improvement did not come from raw material quantity, but from structural optimization. The brain may follow a similar pattern, exchanging volume for connectivity efficiency. Neuroscientists emphasize that neuron density and network organization influence intelligence more than overall size. Regions associated with language, planning, and abstract reasoning show increasing specialization in modern humans. Instead of a broad generalist structure, the brain partitions tasks across refined circuits. Less tissue can sometimes process more information if organized effectively. Yet the debate does not end there. The type of thinking humans perform has changed dramatically in recent centuries. Many daily decisions once required interpretation of natural signals, reading clouds for weather, tracking animals through subtle marks, predicting seasonal cycles. These tasks exercised spatial reasoning, pattern recognition, and long-term memory simultaneously. Modern environments replace these challenges with symbolic systems such as schedules, signs, and digital notifications. The brain adapts to its input. When exposed to natural complexity, it builds models of continuous reality. When exposed to symbolic prompts, it builds models of discrete instructions. Both are forms of intelligence, but they operate differently. A smaller brain may indicate reduced need for maintaining large integrated environmental models. There is also evidence that reaction time has gradually lengthened over historical periods. Some studies comparing 19th century measurements to modern ones suggest slower average sensory processing speed. The results remain debated, yet they raise a possibility. The brain may prioritize different functions than before. Speed in detecting physical threats might matter less than speed in processing language or navigating social information. Education systems further influence neural development. Literacy reorganizes brain regions, repurposing visual processing areas for symbolic interpretation. This improves communication, but reduces reliance on raw sensory pattern recognition. Over many generations, selection could favor brains optimized for cultural environments rather than wilderness survival. Another consideration is cooperative intelligence. Humans rarely solve problems alone now. Knowledge spreads through communities and networks instantly. Individual memory capacity matters less than ability to locate expertise. The brain's role shifts from storing answers to asking effective questions. Cognitive energy moves toward navigation of information rather than retention of it. Domestication theory again provides context. Domesticated species often exhibit reduced brain size alongside increased social tolerance. Aggression control and communication become more important than individual problem-solving under threat. Human societies reward predictability and cooperation. Individuals who function smoothly within structured systems may succeed more than those optimized for solitary adaptability. However, some researchers warn that reliance on shared knowledge can mask declining individual competence. If each person understands for the rest, the brain becomes expert in particular symbolic frameworks, but less practiced in generalized reasoning outside them. The effect is not stupidity, but narrowing of cognitive breadth. There are also metabolic implications. Because the brain consumes significant energy, even small reductions free resources for other biological processes such as immune regulation or reproduction. Evolution may therefore favor compact efficiency once environmental demands permit it. The organism invests only where pressure persists. Cultural acceleration complicates interpretation. Technological progress depends on accumulated knowledge rather than raw cognitive power of individuals. A person today benefits from discoveries made across centuries. Measured performance appears higher because tools amplify thinking. The brain does less original computation, yet achieves greater results through collaboration with stored knowledge. Artificial intelligence intensifies this trend. Systems now assist with translation, calculation, and pattern detection. The brain transitions toward oversight and evaluation roles. If external systems handle repetitive reasoning, internal circuits responsible for those operations may weaken from disuse over generations. Yet humans retain plasticity. When required, individuals can still develop exceptional analytical capacity. Mathematicians, engineers, and scientists demonstrate that the potential remains embedded in biology. The difference lies in necessity. The average person rarely faces situations demanding maximal reasoning without aid. The shrinking brain, therefore, might represent confidence in predictable environments, a large generalist brain prepared for constant uncertainty. A smaller specialized brain assumes stability and external support. The evolutionary gamble is that stability persists. But evolution cannot predict future disruptions. A system optimized for cooperation may struggle under isolation. A mind adapted for retrieval may falter when memory must stand alone. Whether the change becomes advantage or liability depends entirely on the conditions ahead. Humans survived by carrying the world inside their heads. Increasingly, they survive by connecting to a world stored outside them. For most of human existence, memory was not a convenience. It was survival itself. A person who could not remember water sources died. A hunter who forgot migration patterns starved. A group that failed to retain medicinal knowledge lost members to preventable illness. Memory functioned as the central storage system of culture and biology combined. Before writing existed, information could not be separated from the human mind. Knowledge lived only as long as someone remembered it. Entire communities depended on individuals capable of storing vast amounts of detail: locations, seasons, family relations, warnings, rituals, and techniques. The brain therefore evolved to prioritize retention. Forgetting carried real consequences. Oral cultures developed sophisticated strategies to support this demand. Stories contained encoded survival information. Rhythmic patterns improved recall. Repetition across generations reinforced accuracy. People trained memory continuously because daily life required it. Even casual conversation often involved recounting past events with precision. Navigation provides a clear example. Many indigenous groups could travel hundreds of kilometers without maps. Landmarks formed mental networks connected to direction, distance, and environmental cues. This was not extraordinary talent, but ordinary competence. The brain constructed spatial models detailed enough to replace external representation. The arrival of writing marked the first major change. Information no longer needed to remain entirely inside the mind. Clay tablets, carvings, and manuscripts allowed knowledge to persist independently of memory. At first, this did not weaken memory immediately because literacy was rare and texts were scarce. People still memorized extensively. But a new possibility appeared: remembering where information was stored rather than remembering the information itself. Centuries later, printing expanded that possibility. Books multiplied and accessibility increased. The mental burden shifted gradually from preservation to consultation. Scholars still memorized, yet ordinary individuals relied more on reference. Knowledge moved from living memory toward physical storage. The digital age accelerated this transformation dramatically. Modern devices hold more information than any human could memorize in a lifetime. Search engines retrieve facts instantly. The brain no longer rehearses data repeatedly to maintain it. Instead, it records pathways to access data. Memory becomes index rather than archive. Psychologists call this transactive memory. The mind tracks where knowledge exists rather than containing the knowledge directly. A person remembers that a device stores a phone number, but not the number itself. They recall that a website contains directions, but not the route. The mental system reallocates capacity from storage to navigation. Experiments demonstrate this shift clearly. When individuals believe information will be saved externally, they remember it less accurately, but they remember how to retrieve it more reliably. The brain optimizes based on expectation. If external storage is trusted, internal retention declines automatically. Navigation technology provides a powerful illustration. Using satellite guidance reduces activity in brain regions responsible for spatial mapping. People following turn-by-turn instructions form weaker internal representations of geography. They arrive successfully, yet cannot reconstruct the route afterward. The task becomes execution rather than understanding. Telephone numbers once lived in memory through constant use. Today, many people cannot recall even close contacts without checking a device. The cognitive effort previously required for retention no longer exists. The brain adapts by reducing emphasis on recall pathways rarely exercised. Language itself shows subtle change. Spelling accuracy declines when automatic correction systems intervene continuously. The mind relies on feedback rather than internal verification. Over time, confidence in memory weakens, replaced by expectation of external correction. Some researchers argue this represents improvement. Offloading routine storage frees mental resources for reasoning and creativity. The brain does not waste capacity memorizing trivial facts. Instead, it engages with higher-level problems. In this view, external memory functions as an extension of cognition rather than a replacement. Others worry about dependency. Internal memory provides context for thinking. When information exists only externally, thought may become fragmented. Without retained knowledge, connections form less easily because each idea requires retrieval before integration. The difference resembles reading a story continuously versus reading isolated sentences. Historical memory also shifts. Previous generations maintained shared narratives through repetition. Now records exist permanently, yet individuals recall less collectively. Information persists in archives, but fades from daily awareness. Memory moves from communal experience to stored data accessed selectively. Child development reflects this transformation early. Young learners increasingly expect answers to be instantly available. The motivation to rehearse information weakens because rehearsal appears unnecessary. Learning emphasizes recognition over recall. The brain becomes proficient at identifying correct information when presented, but slower at generating it independently. The neurological basis supports this pattern. Memory consolidation strengthens through repeated retrieval. When retrieval stops, pathways weaken. External storage interrupts natural reinforcement cycles. The brain remains capable of memorization, but receives fewer signals to maintain the habit. This does not mean humans are incapable of remembering large bodies of knowledge. Specialists still demonstrate remarkable memory in domains requiring it. The difference lies in default behavior. Memory shifts from universal skill to specialized practice. There is also an emotional dimension. Remembering events deeply often requires effortful recollection. Automated recording changes that relationship. Photographs and logs replace mental reconstruction. Experiences may feel less integrated because the brain does not reconstruct them actively. The replacement of memory, therefore, involves both benefit and cost. Information becomes accessible beyond any individual capacity, yet personal retention diminishes. The mind relies increasingly on networks of storage rather than internal continuity. The essential question emerges: when memory moves outside the brain, does thinking move with it? As external storage became constant, the role of remembering transformed from obligation to option. The brain began operating under a new assumption. Information lost internally is not truly lost if it can be retrieved instantly. This assumption changes behavior at a fundamental level because motivation to preserve detail declines when preservation seems unnecessary. In earlier environments, forgetting carried risk. A misplaced memory about edible plants or seasonal timing could threaten survival. Today, forgetting rarely produces immediate danger. The consequence is inconvenience rather than catastrophe. Because consequences shape cognitive priority, the mind reduces effort spent on retention. Research into learning behavior illustrates this shift. When individuals expect a test requiring recall, they encode information deeply. When they expect open access to references, they encode shallowly. The same brain processes the same material differently, based on anticipated future need. Modern life signals repeatedly that remembering precisely is optional. This change extends beyond facts into procedural memory. Skills once maintained through repetition are now replaced by guided instruction. Cooking, for example, historically relied on memorized sequences and sensory judgment. Now many follow step-by-step prompts each time. The skill exists during performance, but fades afterward because the brain does not consolidate it into long-term patterns. Even conversation reflects altered memory dynamics. People often interrupt recollection to confirm details through devices rather than reconstructing events collaboratively. The shared act of remembering weakens, replaced by verification. Accuracy increases, while personal recall engagement decreases. Some neuroscientists suggest that continuous external assistance may reduce the brain's tendency to build associative networks. Memory is not merely storage, but connection. Each remembered fact links to others, forming understanding. If information is retrieved only when needed and then dismissed, fewer stable links form. Knowledge becomes modular rather than integrated. Consider historical awareness. A person can instantly search any date, event, or figure. Yet, surveys frequently show limited spontaneous recall of historical sequences. The information exists and can be accessed, but it does not reside in working knowledge guiding interpretation of current events. External memory preserves data, while internal memory loses narrative continuity. There is also a temporal effect. Remembering strengthens identity by connecting past and present experiences. When memories are outsourced to recordings, individuals may revisit events through images rather than mental reconstruction. The emotional processing differs. Reconstruction requires interpretation, while playback provides observation. The brain participates less actively in shaping meaning. The concept of cognitive load helps explain why the brain accepts this trade-off. Erasing memory consumes energy and attention. If an alternative storage system performs the function reliably, natural selection favors conserving effort. The mind becomes efficient within its environment. The environment now includes near-perfect recall machines. However, efficiency can narrow capability. Internal memory allows thinking without interruption. External retrieval introduces pauses and context switching. If thinking repeatedly depends on consultation, complex reasoning may fragment into shorter segments. The mind follows available information rather than sustaining long internal chains. Educational patterns reveal similar adaptation. Students increasingly study by recognizing information formats rather than generating answers from memory. They become skilled at identifying correct responses within provided options. This improves performance in structured tasks, but may reduce comfort with unstructured problems lacking immediate references. Importantly, memory capacity itself does not vanish genetically within a few generations. What changes is developmental emphasis. Brains that rarely practice retention allocate neural resources elsewhere. Over many generations, selection may favor individuals who learn quickly from references rather than those who store extensively. The shift would be subtle but cumulative. Cultural memory also transforms. Traditions once depended on repeated retelling. Now, Archives store exact versions. Variation decreases while participation decreases as well. People access heritage when desired instead of carrying it continuously. Culture becomes database rather than living memory. There is an advantage in resilience of information. Knowledge no longer disappears when individuals die. Yet personal understanding may weaken because comprehension grows through repeated recollection. External permanence competes with internal familiarity. Navigation again offers an instructive example. When people memorize routes, they understand spatial relationships and can improvise detours. When they follow instructions, they reach destinations efficiently but struggle when systems fail. The difference lies in model building. Memory builds models, guidance bypasses them. Language learning shows comparable effects. Relying on translation tools reduces vocabulary retention. Communication remains possible, but internal fluency develops slowly. The brain trusts assistance and invests less in storing patterns. These changes accumulate quietly. Each small reliance appears harmless. Together, they redefine cognition. The human mind evolves from repository to interface, from container to connector. Thinking becomes the act of coordinating external knowledge rather than holding it. Whether this represents progress or regression depends on stability. If access remains uninterrupted, the system functions extraordinarily well. Individuals wield knowledge far beyond biological capacity. But if access disappears temporarily, the internal reserve proves thinner than in past eras. The replacement of memory, therefore, does not erase intelligence, it redistributes it. The brain holds less content but manages more connections. Yet connections require infrastructure. Without the network, the modern mind may discover how much of its knowledge resides outside itself. Human attention evolved in an environment where change signaled importance. A sudden sound, a moving shape, or a shifting shadow demanded immediate focus because it could represent threat or opportunity. The brain, therefore, developed a sensitivity to novelty. Anything unexpected interrupted ongoing activity and redirected awareness. This mechanism improved survival but assumed novelty would be rare. In the modern environment, novelty is constant. Information streams refresh continuously. Screens present movement, alerts appear without pause, and multiple tasks compete simultaneously. The attention system reacts exactly as designed, repeatedly shifting toward each new signal. What once protected life now fragments concentration. Sustained focus requires the brain to suppress distractions. This suppression consumes mental energy. When interruptions occur frequently, the brain spends more effort reorienting than processing. Over time, it adapts by lowering expectations for continuous engagement. Instead of resisting distraction, it anticipates it. Experiments measuring reading behavior illustrate the change. People presented with long passages increasingly scan rather than read linearly. Eye-tracking studies show shorter fixation times and more frequent jumps across text. The brain extracts key elements quickly but processes fewer details deeply. Comprehension remains adequate for general understanding, but weakens for complex argument. This pattern appears in problem solving as well. Tasks requiring extended reasoning feel mentally demanding sooner than in environments with fewer interruptions. The difficulty does not arise from inability to think, but from reduced practice maintaining uninterrupted cognitive chains. The brain optimizes for rapid switching rather than persistence. Reward systems reinforce the shift. Each new piece of information provides small feedback. The brain releases motivation signals, encouraging continued scanning. Deep concentration offers delayed reward, while constant novelty offers immediate reward. Given the choice, behavior trends toward immediacy. The phenomenon resembles evolutionary mismatch. A mechanism designed for rare alerts encounters an artificial landscape of continuous alerts. The brain cannot distinguish between important and trivial novelty reliably, so it treats all as potentially significant. Attention becomes reactive rather than selective. Multitasking contributes further. Humans do not truly process multiple complex tasks simultaneously. Instead, they alternate rapidly. Each switch carries a cognitive cost. Memory traces fade slightly and must be reconstructed. Frequent switching, therefore, reduces effective processing capacity even if activity appears productive. Educational observations confirm this effect. Students exposed to high interruption environments struggle with assignments requiring long periods of quiet reasoning. When placed in distraction-free settings, performance improves without additional instruction. The limiting factor is not knowledge, but attention stability. There are neurological correlates. Regions associated with sustained attention show altered activation patterns after repeated task switching. The brain becomes efficient at orienting to new stimuli, but less efficient at maintaining a single representation over time. Adaptation favors responsiveness over endurance. Conversation habits also reflect the change. People often anticipate interruption and shorten statements. Listening periods decrease and responses arrive before full ideas are expressed. Communication accelerates, but depth reduces. The mind expects information to arrive in fragments and processes it accordingly. Even entertainment demonstrates the trend. Media pacing has accelerated over decades. Scene duration shortens and visual changes increase frequency. Viewers acclimate to rapid transitions and find slower pacing difficult to engage with. The brain calibrates expectation for stimulation speed. Sleep patterns interact with attention as well. Continuous exposure to stimulation extends waking engagement but reduces recovery quality. Attention control relies on restorative processes. When these diminish, the threshold for distraction lowers further, reinforcing the cycle. Importantly, individuals retain the capacity for deep focus when trained deliberately. Monks, musicians, and researchers still demonstrate prolonged concentration. The difference lies in environment and habit rather than structural impossibility. However, the average baseline shifts when daily practice changes. From an evolutionary perspective, attention once filtered a quiet world. Now it filters a loud one. The brain adjusts by sampling rapidly rather than examining thoroughly. This adaptation suits environments where breadth matters more than depth, where quick awareness outranks careful analysis. The attention collapse, therefore, does not imply intellectual decline, but cognitive reconfiguration. The mind trades sustained immersion for continuous monitoring. The question becomes whether modern problems require monitoring or immersion. If they require immersion, the adaptation may conflict with demands. Human thought historically depended on uninterrupted sequences, tracking animals, crafting tools, composing narratives. Such activities shaped neural expectations. When sequences fragment, thinking style changes. Ideas become shorter, connections immediate, and patience thinner. The collapse is subtle because productivity can appear high. Many tasks completed quickly create the impression of efficiency, yet tasks requiring long conceptual development encounter resistance. The brain prefers frequent completion over extended uncertainty. Thus, attention transforms from a spotlight held steady to a beam sweeping constantly across the landscape. When attention shifts repeatedly, the brain begins reorganizing how it stores and processes information. Instead of forming long chains of reasoning, it favors short loops of perception and response. Each loop completes quickly, providing closure before the next stimulus arrives. Over time, this pattern becomes default cognition. Working memory plays a central role in this transformation. Working memory temporarily holds information while the brain manipulates it. Complex thinking depends on maintaining several elements simultaneously. Frequent interruption forces the brain to drop some elements before integration occurs. The result is understanding built from fragments rather than structures. Consider reading a detailed argument. The early paragraphs establish premises that support later conclusions. If attention breaks midway, the reader restarts mentally, reconstructing context repeatedly. Comprehension becomes effortful, not because the material is too complex, but because continuity is fragile. The brain adapts by preferring shorter content that fits within uninterrupted intervals. Digital interfaces encourage this behavior intentionally. Information appears in discrete units designed for rapid consumption. Each unit requires minimal context from previous ones. The brain learns to expect closure within seconds. When closure delays, restlessness emerges. Patience, once automatic, becomes a skill requiring conscious effort. Decision-making changes as well. Extended analysis competes with immediate action. When attention endurance shortens, decisions rely more on heuristics and surface cues. These shortcuts often function adequately but reduce tolerance for ambiguity. Situations lacking clear, immediate signals feel uncomfortable, prompting premature conclusions. This pattern influences memory formation. Deep encoding requires sustained engagement. When attention breaks, encoding remains shallow. Information feels familiar but lacks detail. People recognize ideas without recalling their source or reasoning. The sense of knowledge persists while the structure behind it weakens. Social behavior reflects the same adaptation. Conversations increasingly mirror rapid information exchange rather than progressive development of thought. Silence, once part of reflection, now feels like absence. Participants fill gaps quickly to maintain stimulation flow. Dialogue speeds up while contemplation shrinks. There is also a feedback effect. As attention endurance declines, environments adjust to match. Educational materials shorten explanations. Media condenses narratives. Work processes divide tasks into smaller units. Each adjustment reinforces the underlying adaptation, making extended focus appear abnormal. However, the brain remains plastic. When individuals engage in activities requiring sustained attention, endurance gradually returns. The capacity never vanished, it simply went unused. The challenge lies in motivation. Environments offering constant novelty reduce incentive to practice persistence. The economic structure of information intensifies the trend. Systems designed to capture attention compete for time. They reward engagement frequency rather than duration. From a behavioral standpoint, the brain trains in exactly the pattern most rewarded. Repeated, brief focus. Neurologically, dopamine signaling adapts to this rhythm. Anticipation of frequent small rewards alters baseline motivation. Large delayed rewards feel less compelling because they lack continuous reinforcement. Tasks requiring extended effort appear disproportionately difficult relative to their actual complexity. Creative processes illustrate the consequence. Innovation often emerges after long, uninterrupted exploration of ideas. Fragmented attention interrupts the incubation phase necessary for unexpected connections. Ideas remain practical and immediate, but less transformative. The mind produces solutions quickly, yet rarely wanders far from initial assumptions. Historical achievements frequently involved prolonged concentration, constructing theories, mapping territories, composing epics. Such work demanded tolerance for monotony and uncertainty. Modern conditions rarely impose these demands naturally. Instead, they emphasize adaptability and responsiveness. Importantly, attention fragmentation does not eliminate intelligence. It redistributes cognitive strengths. Individuals become adept at scanning large information spaces, identifying relevant signals rapidly, and coordinating multiple small tasks. These are valuable abilities in complex technological societies. The cost appears in reduced depth rather than reduced capability. The distinction matters because regression implies loss without replacement. Here, replacement exists. Continuous monitoring replaces sustained immersion. The brain functions effectively in environments requiring vigilance across many inputs. It struggles when problems require isolation from those inputs. Children raised in high stimulation environments exhibit this adaptation early. They respond quickly to changing cues, but find unstructured, quiet tasks challenging. With training, they can develop focus. Yet, it requires structured practice rather than emerging spontaneously. The broader implication concerns knowledge itself. When attention fragments, culture shifts toward concise expression. Ideas compress into brief formats. Extended reasoning survives primarily in specialized domains. Public discourse favors immediacy over elaboration. If the environment continues rewarding rapid switching, future generations may treat prolonged focus as exceptional rather than normal. The ability will remain possible but uncommon. Like long-distance navigation skills, it may persist mainly among those who deliberately cultivate it. Thus, the attention collapse represents a change in cognitive ecology. The brain adapts to abundant signals by sampling them. Whether this sampling suffices for future challenges depends on whether those challenges require breadth of awareness or depth of understanding. For most of human history, knowledge meant the ability to stay alive without assistance. Skills were not hobbies or interests, they were requirements. A person needed to recognize edible plants, locate water, judge weather changes, construct shelter, and understand animal behavior. These abilities were not specialized professions. They were everyday competence. A child growing up thousands of years ago learned continuously through observation and imitation. They watched how adults moved across terrain, how they handled tools, how they read signs in the environment. By adolescence, they possessed a working understanding of survival within their region. Memory, attention, and physical ability combined into practical knowledge. The modern environment removed most immediate natural pressures. Food arrives through distribution systems rather than gathering or hunting. Water flows through infrastructure. Temperature control comes from built structures. The average person interacts with processed outcomes instead of raw conditions. As a result, the knowledge required to live independently in nature diminished. Consider fire. For early humans, maintaining fire was essential. They knew multiple ignition methods and fuel selection. Today, fire exists primarily as controlled utility. Many individuals cannot produce flame without manufactured devices. The knowledge is accessible in theory, but absent in practice. The difference lies in necessity. Without need, rehearsal disappears. Shelter construction follows the same pattern. Previously, individuals understood how materials interacted with weather. They positioned structures relative to wind and terrain. Modern housing arrives pre-built and standardized. People learn operation rather than creation. Comfort increases while environmental understanding declines. Navigation once demanded interpreting sun position, star movement, land contours, and water flow. Now, satellite systems provide directions with minimal awareness of surroundings. A traveler can reach destinations successfully without forming spatial models. The skill of wayfinding becomes optional rather than universal. Food preparation historically involved recognizing safe versus harmful substances. Knowledge accumulated through tradition and careful testing. Modern food systems centralize this responsibility. Individuals trust labeling and regulation rather than personal identification. The brain allocates less capacity to ecological classification. Weather prediction also transformed. Subtle atmospheric cues once informed daily decisions. Cloud shapes, wind patterns, and animal behavior provided early warnings. Today, forecasts deliver summarized predictions. People respond to announcements rather than observations. Awareness narrows to reported outcomes. Tool creation represents another lost domain. Early humans shaped materials directly: stone, bone, wood. The process required planning, patience, and adaptation to imperfections. Modern tools arrive fully formed. Users understand function but not construction. If tools fail, replacement replaces repair. These changes appear beneficial. Specialized systems provide safer, more efficient results than individual attempts. The average lifespan increased partly because survival no longer depends on personal skill in hostile environments. Yet, dependency emerges as a consequence. Competence shifts from individuals to systems. Emergency scenarios reveal this dependency. When infrastructure fails temporarily, confusion rises quickly. People accustomed to continuous support lack practiced routines for self-sufficiency. The knowledge exists culturally but not experientially. Instruction replaces instinct. Education reflects this transition. Curricula emphasize abstract knowledge applicable across contexts rather than location-specific survival expertise. Students learn principles but rarely practice living directly from environment. The goal becomes participation in technological society rather than independence from it. The brain adapts accordingly. Regions once dedicated to constant environmental monitoring receive less stimulation. Cognitive maps shrink to familiar constructed spaces. Nature becomes unfamiliar territory rather than default habitat. Comfort arises indoors rather than outdoors. Importantly, humans retain the capacity to relearn survival skills rapidly when required. Outdoor training programs demonstrate this repeatedly. Participants develop competence within weeks under guided exposure. The ability remains latent but unpracticed. However, baseline expectation changes. Earlier societies assumed individuals could sustain themselves. Modern societies assume systems will sustain individuals. The difference shapes behavior and planning. Risk tolerance increases because personal fallback decreases. Cultural narratives mirror the shift. Stories once centered on journeys through unpredictable landscapes, many modern narratives center on navigating social or technological systems instead. Survival becomes metaphorical rather than literal. The death of survival skills, therefore, does not represent ignorance, but reallocation of knowledge. Humans mastered environment by building structures that remove daily uncertainty. The cost is fading familiarity with the conditions those structures replaced. Whether this trade-off matters depends on stability. If supportive systems persist, direct survival knowledge remains unnecessary. If disruption occurs, the absence of practiced competence becomes visible. The species retains potential capability, but not routine readiness. Thus, humanity moves from being an organism adapted to nature toward an organism adapted to maintaining systems that buffer nature. As daily life moved further from direct interaction with the natural world, knowledge once carried through experience became conceptual knowledge stored in descriptions. People know that fire requires fuel, oxygen, and ignition, but many have never assembled these elements independently. The understanding exists abstractly rather than physically. The brain distinguishes between knowing about a process and performing it, and only the latter builds automatic competence. Earlier generations developed procedural memory through repetition. Lighting a fire, sharpening tools, or identifying safe water sources occurred frequently enough to become instinctive behavior. Today, these actions are rarely practiced. When individuals attempt them without guidance, hesitation replaces fluency. The skill was not genetically lost, it simply never formed. Food illustrates this transformation clearly. Foraging demanded recognition of subtle variations between edible and harmful plants. Taste, smell, and appearance guided decisions. Modern diets depend on standardized products whose safety has been pre-verified. Sensory discrimination becomes less relevant, and people grow cautious around unfamiliar natural foods despite their ancestors depending on them daily. Seasonal awareness has also faded. Agricultural societies once tracked environmental cycles carefully. Even urban populations recognized shifts in daylight and temperature as indicators for preparation. Artificial lighting and climate control reduce sensitivity to seasonal cues. Time is measured by clocks and calendars rather than environmental change. Water procurement presents another example. Locating drinkable water historically involved reading terrain, vegetation patterns, and animal behavior. Now access depends on plumbing systems. Many individuals cannot identify reliable natural water sources within their own region. The brain stores procedures for operating valves rather than locating springs. Repair skills declined in parallel. Tools and devices once required maintenance because replacement was difficult. Knowledge of materials, friction, and wear accumulated naturally. Modern manufacturing favors replacement over repair due to efficiency. Understanding internal mechanisms becomes unnecessary for ordinary use. The difference becomes apparent during unexpected disruption. When electricity fails or supply chains pause briefly, people often wait for restoration rather than adapting immediately. The default response is reliance on system recovery rather than independent solution building. This response reflects rational expectation because systems usually recover quickly. Yet it demonstrates how behavior adjusted to reliability. There is also a psychological shift. Earlier humans perceived themselves as participants within environment. Weather and landscape were partners in daily planning. Modern humans often perceive environment as background managed by infrastructure. Interaction occurs through mediation, windows, screens, and vehicles. Awareness becomes indirect. Children raised with minimal outdoor exploration may develop reduced confidence in unfamiliar natural settings. The environment appears unpredictable because it has not been experienced gradually. Without early exposure, adaptation feels abrupt rather than intuitive. Fear replaces familiarity not because the environment grew more dangerous, but because learning opportunities declined. Some communities intentionally preserve traditional skills through training programs. Participants often rediscover abilities quickly, suggesting the human brain retains strong capacity for ecological learning. The challenge lies in motivation. When daily life does not require these abilities, sustained practice rarely occurs. Technology provides remarkable advantages in exchange for this dependency. Large populations survive in areas that could not support them through individual subsistence alone. Medicine, transportation, and communication depend on coordinated systems beyond any individual's control. The species thrives collectively while individuals specialize narrowly. Human intelligence did not evolve only to solve physical problems. It evolved primarily to manage other humans. For early communities, survival depended on cooperation within small groups. Individuals needed to interpret expressions, detect deception, maintain alliances, and resolve conflict. Social awareness functioned as a critical survival tool equal to physical strength. These groups were small enough that everyone knew each other personally. Each face carried history. Every interaction influenced future cooperation. Because relationships were repeated continuously, misunderstanding carried immediate consequences. The brain therefore developed acute sensitivity to tone, posture, and subtle emotional signals. Modern societies transformed this environment. Individuals now interact with hundreds or thousands of people indirectly. Many interactions occur briefly or through text rather than presence. The brain confronts a scale of social complexity different from the one it evolved to handle. Instead of deep familiarity with a few, it manages shallow familiarity with many. Digital communication intensifies this shift. Written messages lack vocal tone and facial cues. The receiver reconstructs intent from limited information. Misinterpretations increase not because people became less empathetic, but because information decreased. The brain fills gaps using assumptions rather than observation. In physical conversation, timing communicates meaning. Pauses indicate thought, hesitation, or disagreement. Online exchanges compress time. Responses arrive instantly or after long delay without clear context. The brain struggles to map these patterns onto ancestral expectations. Emotional prediction becomes less accurate. Loneliness paradoxically increases despite constant connection. Humans evolved to read presence, shared space, synchronized movement, mutual attention. Digital interaction transmits symbols but not physical co-experience. The brain registers communication yet lacks sensory confirmation of belonging. Social satisfaction declines even as contact frequency rises. Group dynamics also change. Small communities required consensus and long memory of behavior. Reputation formed gradually and persisted. Modern networks allow rapid formation and dissolution of relationships. Consequences become distributed across anonymous populations. Accountability weakens because interactions rarely repeat between identical participants. Empathy depends partly on observing subtle expressions. Continuous exposure to varied real faces trained this skill historically. Screen-mediated communication reduces exposure to micro-expressions. Recognition of nuanced emotion becomes less practiced. People still care, but interpret signals less precisely. Yet, social networks expand opportunity for diverse contact. Individuals encounter perspectives impossible within isolated groups. Cognitive empathy toward distant populations can increase, while immediate interpersonal sensitivity decreases. Social intelligence redistributes rather than simply declines. The ancestral brain expected stable tribes. The modern brain navigates fluid crowds. Skills suited to one environment may weaken in the other. Remembering detailed histories about a few individuals becomes less relevant than quickly categorizing many unfamiliar ones. This adaptation influences trust. In small groups, trust relied on repeated observation. In large systems, trust relies on rules and verification mechanisms. The brain shifts from personal judgment to institutional reliance. Emotional intuition yields to procedural assurance. Human civilization has always relied on cooperation, but modern civilization relies on interlocking systems so complex that no individual fully understands them. A person wakes each day surrounded by invisible processes. Electricity flowing through distant generators, water purified by unseen facilities, food transported across continents, and information transmitted through networks spanning the planet. Life continues smoothly because thousands of coordinated operations function simultaneously. Earlier societies also depended on shared effort, yet most processes remained observable. A farmer understood planting, harvesting, and storage. A builder knew how structures stood. Even when individuals specialized, they grasped the basics of survival tasks. Today, specialization extends far beyond direct comprehension. People operate interfaces connected to mechanisms they never encounter physically. Electric power offers a clear illustration. With a single switch, a room becomes illuminated, temperature adjusts, and devices activate. The action feels simple because the interface is simple. Behind it lies generation plants, transmission grids, transformers, and regulation systems. If power stops, most individuals cannot restore it or even diagnose the cause. Capability resides entirely within food, water, sanitation, electricity, and waste management arrive through intricate networks. Life depends entirely on continuous operation and coordination. Skills for wilderness survival, basic construction, or long-term isolation are rarely exercised. This transformation is adaptive under normal circumstances. Humans benefit from enhanced safety, longer lifespans, and richer experiences. The species has effectively extended its ecological niche through technological scaffolding. Yet stability introduces vulnerability. When interconnected systems fail simultaneously, the lack of practiced independent skills becomes evident. The capacity for self-reliance exists only as latent potential. Historical comparison highlights the contrast. Previous societies managed daily survival through direct engagement. Individuals balance physical, cognitive, and social skills to maintain autonomy. The modern individual interacts primarily with outcomes mediated by others. Efficiency replaces redundancy in personal capability. Resilience now resides in networks rather than individuals. Redundancy is systemic. Backup generators, parallel supply chains, and digital copies mitigate failure. Biological and cognitive adaptation to direct challenges declines because exposure is reduced. Skills atrophy silently while systems assume responsibility. Cultural expectations reinforce dependency. Success is measured by the ability to navigate institutions, operate tools, and coordinate with networks rather than survive independently. Autonomy is valued socially only when it manifests as skill within the system, not isolation survival. Evolutionary pressure shifts from environmental competence to systemic competence. Emergency planning illustrates the risk. Natural disasters or infrastructure collapse highlight gaps in personal skill. People accustomed to continuous support struggle to improvise. Collective systems mitigate some risk, but reliance on them means individuals must trust external competence more than personal ability. Dependency also shapes cognition. Mental models prioritize processes over mechanisms. People understand procedure without mastery of underlying principles. Interface fluency replaces experiential understanding. This reorients intelligence towards system interaction rather than environmental navigation. The modern species, therefore, exhibits distributed competence. Capabilities persist across networks rather than within individuals. Collective functioning surpasses individual performance in complexity and efficiency. Yet, when these networks falter, gaps in individual competence reveal the fragility of dependency. In sum, dependency civilization illustrates a trade-off: comfort, productivity, and scale at the cost of personal survival skill. Humans thrive under reliable systems, but may struggle when removed from them. Evolution direction. The answer is neither simple nor absolute. Instead, it requires analyzing the nature of adaptation itself and how it interacts with modern environments. Biologically, humans have not ceased evolving. Bones, muscles, and even brains continue to respond to environmental pressures or lack thereof. Skeletal robustness declines when mechanical stress disappears. Neural structures adjust to cognitive demands, emphasizing efficiency over raw volume. Memory adapts to reliance on external storage. Attention patterns shift toward rapid scanning. Survival skills diminish when systems supply stability. Social intelligence reorganizes to manage large populations. Dependency on infrastructure replaces direct capability. In each case, humans respond to conditions, not arbitrary decay. The traditional idea of regression assumes loss of capability without replacement. In many respects, modern adaptations involve substitution rather than disappearance. Physical strength may decrease, but cognitive integration with technology compensates. Memory retention declines, but access to external databases amplifies overall knowledge. Attention fragments, yet multitasking and rapid information assessment emerge as new proficiencies. Skills change in type rather than vanish entirely. However, the replacements carry their own vulnerabilities. Physical atrophy reduces resilience under extreme environmental conditions. Externalized memory and system dependence create fragility in case of failure. Social intelligence optimized for digital mediation may misfire in face-to-face interaction. Evolutionary trade-offs favor efficiency and comfort over universal competence. What emerges is a species exceptionally capable within specific contexts, but potentially less adaptable outside them. Cultural evolution accelerates this process. Unlike biological evolution, cultural evolution can outpace genetic adaptation. Technology, urbanization, and social networks shift environmental pressures faster than genes can follow. Humans now evolve in dual dimensions, biologically responding to use and disuse, culturally responding to new tools and structures. Cognitive function adapts to system interaction even as raw biological capacities decline. The interplay between biology and technology is central. Humans outsource memory, computation, navigation, and even problem-solving to machines. Each extension becomes a functional replacement for internal capacity. The brain learns to coordinate with external devices, offloading certain cognitive demands. In evolutionary terms, this creates a hybrid intelligence, part biological, part technological. Is this regression or transformation? Perspective determines the answer. A historical lens provides context. Each stage of civilization involved shifts in capability. Agriculture decreased physical demands but expanded population density. Industrialization reduced manual labor while increasing specialized expertise. Modern digital civilization reduces many traditional skills while creating entirely new ones. Change itself is constant. The content of survival shifts with environment. Regression appears only when compared to prior baseline rather than adaptive alignment. The human brain illustrates this principle clearly. Average volume may have decreased slightly over millennia, yet connectivity and efficiency may have improved. Memory externalization reduces internal storage but expands collective cognition. Attention fragmentation impairs sustained focus but enhances responsiveness to multiple simultaneous stimuli. Intelligence reorganizes, reflecting a new evolutionary strategy rather than simple decline. The question of morality and societal impact arises. Humans capable of complex abstract thought may rely increasingly on tools, potentially losing individual resilience. If technological failure occurs, populations face collective vulnerability. Dependence on systems introduces risk previously absent in direct survival contexts. Evolution favors cooperation with infrastructure, yet infrastructure itself must persist for the adaptation to remain advantageous. Similarly, social intelligence illustrates trade-offs. Smaller ancestral groups require detailed familiarity, nuanced empathy, and repeated interaction. Modern societies require rapid interpretation, digital literacy, and coordination across vast networks. Skills evolve to suit environment. Loss of older forms of competence is offset by acquisition of new forms. Judgment must shift from face-to-face accuracy to network navigation. Failure occurs only if environmental assumptions are violated. Some theorists propose that humans are entering a transitional phase. Biological regression may appear in certain areas, yet cognitive and cultural evolution expands capacity elsewhere. Memory, attention, and social skills may diminish in traditional forms, while new capabilities, digital reasoning, system navigation, and collaborative problem-solving emerge. Selection pressures favor those able to operate efficiently within the constructed environment rather than the natural one. In essence, humans are neither universally stronger nor weaker than their ancestors. We are differently capable. The species trades generalist resilience for specialized proficiency in constructed contexts. The question becomes one of stability. If the environment remains predictable and infrastructure persists, humans thrive. If disruption occurs, latent fragility emerges, revealing the cost of efficiency-focused adaptation. Future evolution may continue in this hybrid trajectory. Integration with technology, artificial intelligence, and bioengineering could further transform cognition and capability. Biology may shrink in some domains while extending into new forms through artificial augmentation. Traditional measures of strength, memory, or independence may lose relevance entirely as humans evolve into system-integrated organisms. Ultimately, regression may reflect perception rather than fact. Viewed against ancestral benchmarks, humans appear weaker in certain physical and cognitive dimensions. Viewed in the context of environmental adaptation, humans are differently optimized, reflecting survival within highly engineered contexts. Evolution persists. The form and focus of survival simply shift. The challenge is not merely biological, but philosophical. What defines progress? Is evolution measured by raw capability, adaptability to natural conditions, or effectiveness within constructed systems? Modern humans illustrate that species can transform radically without traditional regression, thriving in ways that ancestors could not even imagine. The final consideration in assessing human transformation lies in contingency, the relationship between adaptation and environmental stability. Humans have constructed conditions that vastly reduce immediate survival pressures. Energy, food, and shelter are abundant for the majority. Medical systems mitigate mortality. Technology extends physical and cognitive capacity. Under these circumstances, biological and cognitive changes may appear as regression relative to ancestral benchmarks, but in reality, they are responses to a different set of selective pressures. Dependency on infrastructure, digital memory, and collective coordination exemplifies this shift. Individuals no longer require the full spectrum of survival skills. Instead, they must understand systems and anticipate their reliability. Cognitive energy once devoted to environmental problems outside the systems for which it is optimized has diminished. Modern cognitive evolution also reflects collaborative intelligence. Individuals rarely operate in isolation. Knowledge is distributed across communities, databases, and networks. The brain functions as part of a larger cognitive ecosystem. A person may no longer memorize information internally, but can access vast resources through external storage. Intelligence becomes relational rather than solitary. This form of adaptation favors integration, coordination, and rapid retrieval over individual recall, a shift with profound implications for education, skill acquisition, and cultural transmission. Similarly, social intelligence has adapted to a vastly larger scale. Humans now interact with hundreds or thousands of people across cultural and geographical boundaries, often mediated by technology. The brain reconfigures its perceptual and emotional circuits to navigate these abstract social spaces. Skills once required for intimate face-to-face groups evolve into proficiency in interpreting digital cues, managing reputation in complex networks, and coordinating action across distant communities. Depth is traded for breadth, precision for scalability. Yet these transformations entail risk. The brain, body, and culture now rely heavily on the continuous operation of systems over which the individual has limited control. In the event of infrastructure collapse, environmental disruption, or prolonged isolation, latent fragilities would emerge. Human survival now depends as much on system resilience as on biology. This vulnerability might superficially resemble regression, but it reflects a trade-off, not a flaw. Efficiency and comfort at the cost of independence. The question of regression also intersects with philosophical and ethical considerations. Modern humans have unprecedented capacity to manipulate their environment, extend life, and enhance cognitive function through technology. In the past, raw physical and cognitive capability defined survival. Now, adaptability within constructed systems defines it. Measures of strength or intelligence must shift accordingly. What appears as decline in one metric may represent profound enhancement in another. Furthermore, the evolution of human capability is accelerating. Technological integration through artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and extended cognition reshapes what the human species can do and how it thinks. Traditional forms of knowledge may wane, but new forms emerge that no prior generation could comprehend. Memory outsourcing, attention fragmentation, and digital dependency are not failures, but elements of a new adaptive strategy, creating humans who are networked, hybrid, and system-dependent. Ultimately, humans occupy a transitional phase. The species has moved from mastery of immediate, tangible environments to mastery of complex, abstract systems. Physical prowess, deep internal memory, and individual survival skill are less essential. System navigation, collaborative cognition, and technological integration are increasingly central. Whether this constitutes regression depends entirely on the frame of reference. Compared to ancestral humans in natural environments, decline appears. Compared to modern humans in engineered environments, adaptation flourishes. The most important insight is that human evolution is context-dependent. Traits evolve to match prevailing pressures, not historical ideals. What the species gains in efficiency, comfort, and capability within constructed systems may not translate to wilderness survival, but it maximizes function in the environment who humans have themselves created. Evolution continues. it simply follows new criteria. In conclusion, humans are neither wholly regressing nor strictly progressing. They are transforming. Biology, cognition, and social intelligence adjust to an engineered world where survival is collective, mediated, and technologically augmented. What once defined strength, memory, and competence is no longer universally applicable. Evolution persists as a dynamic, responsive process, revealing that the human species is neither fixed nor static, but constantly negotiating between biology, culture, and environment. A hybrid organism capable of extraordinary adaptation, yet intimately reliant on the systems it has constructed for its continued flourishing.